Welcome once again. We're going to jump right into a conversation for this hour. We're going to be talking as Nigeria's digital ecosystem. Now, over the past few decades, digital technologies have emerged as somewhat the most disruptive and transformative forces across all sectors and economies. Now, the speed of this innovation, this disruption, this diffusion of these technologies is quite unprecedented, and it has a lot of implications for development of any nation. Now, for a country like Nigeria that is still developing in so many degrees, you can only begin to imagine how increasingly aware of these opportunities that lie within the digital ecosystem are for us. And some even argue that there are lots of risks involved of being left behind in this race to digital transformation. Now, joining me via telephone, he is a media personality, a communications expert as well. He is a media analyst with over 7 years of experience, and we'll be talking about, Nigeria's digital ecosystem. Please join me. Welcome, Mr. David Adeleke. You're welcome to the show, David.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's dive right in because we are pressed for time. What would you say is the concept of digital economy?
To put it simply, the digital economy is made up of businesses and individuals that are built on layers of digital technology like the internet, your smartphone, your computers, and so on. That's just putting it in a nutshell. Of course, it's more complex than that, but that's the easiest way to explain it. So basically, businesses and opportunities that are built on digital technology.
Now, why would you say this is so important to an economy like Nigeria's?
Well, it's really important because if you think about all the different industrial or all the different economic revolutions or innovations in the past 100 years, this is the one that Nigeria has in some ways easily caught up with the most because it didn't require some sort of industrial installation. So, for example, in the industrial revolution, there had to be actual physical factories. But much of the innovation or much of the opportunities in this digital economy are built on things that we can't necessarily see. So new types of technology like just simple things like my ability to communicate with you over the phone. You can't really see the sound waves. You can't really see the signals being from one satellite to the other.
Right.
All those things are, yes, the infrastructure that makes it possible is important, but much of the opportunities are unseen, right? And also a lot of the value is not visible to the physical eye, and it doesn't require too much to set up, or it doesn't require too much to access. With your phone or with your laptop and internet connection, you have access to myriad of opportunities. So that's what makes it important for Nigeria, because it doesn't require too much, and I say that within the context of history, right? It doesn't require too much for us to tap into it.
So it's not beyond us as a nation.
It's not beyond us. Yes, that's a very good way to put it. It's not beyond us. And you can see that with the quality of innovation that is already happening in Nigeria, especially within the financial technology ecosystem is the most obvious example. But then there are other types of innovation that are happening too. If we think how people consume media, how people produce media, how people think about making money from these things.
Now, we would find that the digital economy across the world globally is worth over 11 trillion or even more US dollars right now, and that's equivalent to I think 15% of the global GDP. And I mean, for the past 2.5, couple of years since year 2000, if I'm not mistaken, it's grown by, almost 3 times that figure. So where would you say we are as an economy right now in Nigeria in the scheme of things? How do we begin to measure up?
Well, we still have a long way to go. That's just the fact. We have a long way to go because you and I had this conversation on LinkedIn before we agreed to have this call. there is a lot of infrastructure building that has to happen for us to really catch up. And I say that with the full understanding that there is already a lot of work that has been done in terms of building infrastructure for us to even get to where we are. But there's still a lot more work that we need to do in terms of building infrastructure. I mean, simple things like internet availability, or even just the cost of data. Nigeria is still one of the most expensive places to buy data in the world.
And that's really shocking,
because, yeah, it's not necessarily shocking because, I mean, it's pure economics, right? The cost of production determines the cost of sale. If something is expensive to produce, then it's going to be expensive to sell. Do you understand? And so just the amount of investment that has to go into building the necessary internet infrastructure for people to then layer other opportunities on, it takes a lot. So you look at companies like MTN, you look at companies like Main One, even Google and Facebook that are trying to lay cables. It costs them a lot to even do those things in the first place. But the more we have that, the cheaper data can become. But the problem is that we don't yet have enough of that infrastructure on ground to support other forms of innovation that make it cheaper for people to have access to these things.
So this particular challenge you already mentioned, how do we surmount it? Because again, there is a conversation of priority for the Nigerian government, or not just the present government, past, present, and even who knows the future. How do we, surmount these challenges, taking into consideration the body language of the Nigerian climate and atmosphere?
So there are two ways to answer that question. There is the very simple answer, which is that we just need to do better, we just need to invest more, or we need to, focus on what we can build and all of that. That's the simple answer. The more difficult answer is that there has to be some sort of compromise between the public sector and the private sector. The public sector has to be willing to let go of some level, has to be willing to cede some level of control to the private sector to innovate. And that's where things are really going to take off. Because the truth is, people from outside the country and even within the country, they see the population of Nigeria for the potential value that it can bring to the table. Now, the problem is actually capturing that value and bringing it to the table. And to do that, there has to be, like I said before, investment in infrastructure. And there are companies that are willing to invest in this infrastructure because they know that if they invest in this infrastructure, it's going to create new market opportunities for them. Let's use Facebook as an example. Now, Mark Zuckerberg came to Nigeria some years ago to assess the tech ecosystem. And after that, he started making some strategic investments. Facebook did something with Airtel, where they provided free Wi-Fi. But that was not enough, and it wasn't really effective. That's what led to, I think, Facebook Basic or Facebook Lite, where people could go on Facebook for free. Facebook can do that because they know that the more people can come online, the more people can use Facebook. It's a natural progression. So if the public sector is willing to cede some level of control to the private sector to say, okay, you guys innovate, and because we know that if more people come online, that's more people who can make money or who can build businesses within the digital economy. But it's a lot more complex than that, but that's just a basic way of looking at the problem and saying, okay, you guys come up with solutions, we give you all the support that you need, and then we see where it goes from there. But, I mean, you and I know well enough that that's just not, it's not going to be that simple, right? It's a lot more complicated than that. There's politics involved. There are other economic calculations that may be out of 90 right now that we have to think about. So it's not easy. It's not easy at all.
So that means something indeed has to give. And if
exactly something has to give for this thing to happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
And for the generation that is coming, I mean, the millennials right now are amazingly forward thinking, So
they're digitally native.
Exactly. So for the crop of young people we're breeding in Nigeria, how do we then create that room for them to explore when we're faced with such, heartbreak?
Again, it's all of these things are going to be driven by the private sector in collaboration with the public sector. And This is not to say that the public sector has no role to play in it. I mean, think about the internet in the U.S., the way the internet spread. The military, the U.S. government had a massive role to play in how the internet evolved, or in how the internet has evolved to become more democratized. The U.S. government has had a role to play in how Silicon Valley, I mean, we all talk about Silicon Valley now, but the U.S. government had a role to play in how Silicon Valley evolved to become what it is. So the public sector has its role to play. But much of the innovation is going to be driven by private sector experiment. Yeah.
All right, well, we're going to have to wrap the conversation up shortly, but again, under this kind of somewhat hostile atmosphere in Nigeria, again, it's not peculiar to Nigeria, I must mention at this point. It's more of a challenge for developing countries, mainly in Africa.
Yeah.
What would you say are the active elements that we need as Nigerians, away from, yes, the government has, shares the huge bulk of the responsibility to provide, but what role do you think that Nigerians can play in, building and advancing our ecosystem here?
That's a very good question. I think at the foundation of it is just curiosity and the willingness to actually look out for these things. And that, I mean, I have to say that that's something that I've seen with a lot of Nigerians, especially the young Nigerians and some old Nigerians. They're particularly curious about new forms of technology, and people are actively trying things out. But there just has to be more curiosity, more willingness to try new things, more willingness to look for new things, to look for the people who are already solving these problems. Because there are quite a lot of people who are trying new things, especially here I live in Lagos, and so I'm actively observing the tech ecosystem, and there is just so much innovation that is going on. And so we just need more Nigerians to become more curious about these things, to constantly ask themselves questions. How can I play a role in making sure that this thing that is in many ways nascent, is still forming, can become more mature? And if you have more Nigerians asking that question, and this will require people to invest more in themselves, understand new technologies, how they can use new technologies for their own benefit and for the benefit of people around them, how people can, just the question around how can I make money, from this thing, how can I build a business that enables more people to solve their own problems using technology, using new forms of digital innovation. So just being curious enough to ask yourself this question is a good step forward. And then also putting your money where your mouth is. These things require money to build, and there just has to be more investment from the people who are already rich. There is a class of people who have the financial resources who are just not, maybe they are just not curious enough to try and understand what type of innovation is going on within the technology ecosystem. Those people need to actually sit down and start asking more questions, and okay, how can I help with my money? And just those simple steps. They are simple. They are not easy, but they are simple. These simple steps will lead to tremendous results.
And this will be my final question, because we're out of time already. We obviously are ready, right? It's a question anyway, but would you say we're ready right now where we are for this kind of advancement?
You've answered the question. We are ready. I think Nigerians are ready. People just need guidance. People just need the necessary knowledge. And people just need to be more curious. That's really it. Just be more curious about things. Be more open-minded. Look for these things because they are happening. People are building things. It will shock you the amount of innovation that is going on in silos. But people these people just need, they need funding, they need people to discover them, they need people to believe in them, to pay attention to what they are doing. And a lot is going to explode positively if that happens.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. David Adeleke, for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Sadly, we had very little time as against our initial plan, but thank you regardless. Have a great one.
Thank you for having me.
All right, the conversation ends here. Thank you so much for joining us at 1 o'clock. The news update right after. There'll be some information that will take us all to 1:30, and I'll be joined by guests for the next 30 minutes on Center for Environment. I'm Gabriella. Don't go away.